Welcome to the discussion of the downstream industry. Let me tell you right up front that a lot of people in the energy industry consider refining just downright boring because, as you're going to see, it's a very capital intense business that depends on a lot of stability. But it does have an impact on the E&P business, and that's really what I want you to gather. So what we're going to talk about is just a basic overview to the refining industry, uh, what it does, where the products are located. Then we're going to get into a little bit of the physics slash chemistry slash hardware of the refining business. And then we're going to look specifically at Valero, which is one of the major refiners, to see how that translates into dollar terms. So, first question, how does the refining business differ between the oil and natural gas markets? If you think about it, gas has to be gone through a gas treatment plant fairly close to where it's produced, and then it's good to go to ship on to the end customer. Whereas oil products almost entirely need to go to a refinery, and they're transformed through that refining process, and then they're sent out. So there's that extra big step built in, whereas the gas products can be cleaned up much closer to the wellhead. So, trivia question. When was the last refinery in the United States built? You can click on the link and get the answer. I trust that you've clicked. Now let's talk about the answer. For a long time, the answer was there hadn't been a major refinery built in the United States for lots of years. And then you can see with the oil boom in the mid 2010s, that changed. But I do want you to go back and look at that site and see that everything that's been constructed relatively recently is small. You have to go back to the late 1970s before you see a truly large refinery built. In part, that's because the refining capacity required is going down, not because the amount of product being refined is going down, but because the existing refineries become so much more capable. The reason that it's hard to build refineries is, one, it's very expensive, and two, there's a lot of environmental issues that have to be run to ground. That's why you don't tend to see significant new refineries being built. So, why does this matter to you, the person that's interested in an E&P kind of company? Well, obviously, the refineries are the actual purchasers of the product. The pipeline companies buy it from you to put it into the pipeline so they can sell it to the refiners. And the refiners have a very big control of what gets bought and in what quantities. So this has a lot to do financially, and we're going to talk about that with we've already talked about some about the WTI Brent spread, but you're going to see realistically why the refiners are doing what they're doing and why you're currently seeing so much light sweet crude sold overseas. Also, you're going to see that where the refineries are located has an impact, because obviously the closer that oil and gas is produced, oil is produced to the refinery, the better, because there's less transportation costs. And then a question. Is it all driven by the global price of oil? And as you're going to see, it's not, because of the inherent transportation costs. The Brent WTI spread was a big deal. It has, in the fall of 2017, it's becoming a bigger deal, and I'll illustrate that to you a little bit later in the presentation. Key term, crack spread. Crack spread is a proxy for profits in the refining business, and it's simply what's the price at which they're able to sell the refined products versus the price that they're able to buy the crude. Now, a lot of controversy about how are the oil companies doing really. The graphic in the top left is a little bit dated, and you can see it ends in I can't see from here, 2015, and it was talking about the variations between oil prices and gas prices was getting a little bit wider, implication that the crack spread is increasing. The graphic in the bottom right-hand side, though, is to show you that the crack spread is not nearly as good in the United States as it used to be, but it's coming much closer to the world average, which just says that it is a global market. And incidentally, refineries in the United States do export quite a bit of product. I'm doing this from deep memory, so I could be wrong, but I believe we export about 1 million barrels a day of gasoline from United States-based refineries. You can see that there are a very finite number of refineries in the United States. and very importantly, you can see where they are. And the answer, like we talked about when Hurricane Harvey hit in the fall of 2017, is most of the refineries are located right on the Gulf Coast. You see the statistic there, 44% of the refineries are located on the Gulf Coast. And if you look at Texas wide, you can see that Texas and Louisiana are huge keepers, if you will, of refining capacity. Notice some other major refineries there are on the eastern coast in the northeastern United States or mid-central United States. That is a little bit of a legacy. That's where the refineries were there from the early Pennsylvania oil fields and the eastern oil fields. And also they're a big recipient of OPEC oil for refining. You see the ones that are more in the heartland. Again, a little bit of that is a legacy of Standard Oil where the refineries were first built. And it's also a pickup of where products that are produced in the mid-United States are shipped into those refineries. Notice very little refining capacity up in the Bakken area in the Dakotas, which is why all their oil has to be moved. Notice that there's some on the west coast of the United States, to include some up in the ports in Washington. So dispersed on the one hand, but on the other hand, the bulk of it is right here on the Gulf Coast. In terms of companies, you see the largest companies. Incidentally, there are some of those companies that are household names to you and a lot of them that are not. For example, number 10 is Koch Industries, and if you're familiar with the Koch brothers, yeah, it's those guys. So again, not that many companies that do this business. Here's where they're located, and this is the staggering part. When you look at the largest refineries, notice you have to go all the way down to the 6th largest refinery to get a refinery that's not pretty much in the Texas, Louisiana, Gulf Coast region. And you can also see some of those city names that have the biggest ones are the ones that were impacted by Hurricane Harvey. There's been a lot of, or I shouldn't say a lot, there's been some consolidation in the refining industry. So the next 3 slides, I'm not trying to get you to walk away with anything in particular other than to see that there has been a lot of consolidation. But then you see some interesting things. So if you look towards the bottom right of the chart, notice that Delta Airlines has its own refinery. That's an interesting story in of itself. If you were still taking me with the strategy class, we would talk about that as an example of vertical integration. Next up, we're going to get into the physics and the chemistry of refining. Join me for that next video.